Hello, Chris McMeeking with Mobilely here, and I am super excited about this video. Effective iOS accessibility testing with VoiceOver. I'm sorry, I am covering a really complicated topic. This is going to be long. There's actually something in here for a little bit for everybody. We're going to dive deeper into some of the concepts I covered yesterday regarding name, role, and value. And how we can look for those things and what the appropriate way of presenting those things is. Even if you are not deeply interested in testing with VoiceOver, there is still something super meaningful for you to get out of this video. About Mobilely, my name is Chris McMeeking. I am a native mobile accessibility engineer and have been since native mobile was a thing. See the intro video to this channel for more information on my background. I am on a mission to post a video every day, or what's becoming every other day, but I'm going to post the Android videos after Global Accessibility Awareness Day. I will absolutely do the process that I am going through with iOS right now after GAD, but I started to feeling like if I were to present this information in a little bit more user-friendly way, that it would be more consumable. So I'm slowing down, but I'm presenting things a little more concretely, and you're going to see examples of how I do that today. Around Global Accessibility Awareness Day, I plan to publish MOBCAG. I am pretty sure on that acronym. I like MOBCAG or MOBCAG. Feels natural. Mobile content accessibility guidelines. The videos leading up to this are meant to inform why such an interpretation is necessary. Hint, today's is a big one in this category. Apple, you're confusing us all and we need you to guide us. Yeah, that pretty much says it, and I'm going to outline exactly how in this video as it relates to effective iOS voiceover testing. Let's go. iOS videos thus far. We've covered an introduction to mobile accessibility, an introduction to voiceover, how iOS assistive technologies work, the importance of separating accessibility label, accessibility value, and other properties was something we covered in that video, something that we're going to dive deeper into today. And today, effective iOS accessibility testing with voiceover. Let's go. Effective voiceover testing. As a non-sighted accessibility tester, I would like to test applications in a way that allows me to know that the content I have tested is usable by all assistive technology users and report those results back in a way that helps my development team make meaningful progress so that we can work together to create better content for all users. I'm sorry, that was a long sentence. I could have sectioned it out. Great statement, though. We want to, as voiceover accessibility testers, make sure that we are testing things in a way that leads to success for all assistive technology users. If this is you, you are in the right place. If this isn't you, stick around. You might learn something anyway. There's a lot of good content in this video for those engineers that are never going to open voiceover. Knowing this stuff will help you communicate with people who do. Fundamental truth about voiceover testing. As a voiceover user, I cannot effectively test an application for other users, mostly because user-friendly configurations don't make sense for testing. When we are testing with voiceover, we have to configure voiceover in a certain way to provide an abundance of meaning. Right? So as a voiceover user who is also a tester, I may have to get used to some different configurations for my testing process, or more likely just keep a separate testing device, right? It's hard to go back and forth, and some of these configurations take a while to set up. Keep a testing device. Hey, Apple, feature voiceover 2 different configurations would be cool. Testing in a user-centric configuration ignores some of the most important aspects of accessibility testing: semantic testing, accessibility label, accessibility value, and accessibility traits, actionability, etc. Without certain configurations, these things are left by separations of subtle pauses, which as a user is great because it takes less time than saying the word comma, and the pause is more natural for speaking. but we lose the semantics, and the semantics are important. WCAG 4.1.2, see my retranslation in the video yesterday, is one of the most important WCAG success criteria because it allows us to test with one assistive technology, at least an assistive technology that tests for the properties. It allows us to test with one assistive technology and infer that the rest are accessible without even knowing about them. This concept of WCAG 4.1.2 and robustness and doing things that the way the operating system intends to do them is the thing that keeps us from having to test everything. All of the assistive technologies, you can't do that. You have to test with one and make sure that within testing with one, you're testing for that semantic correctness. And the only way to do that is to configure VoiceOver in a certain way. As a non-sighted tester using VoiceOver, it might seem like testing this deeply is impossible, but it isn't. And I'm going to show you how to do it. This is, like I said, this is a fun video. Let's go. Sorry, I was excited to get to this point. Those other videos were boring in comparison to this one. Necessary, but boring. Let's talk about VoiceOver testing. All right, preparation, configuring VoiceOver. I'm going to talk about those. I already set up my device to do this. I ran over in my introduction to VoiceOver a bunch of these settings. So if you're curious about how to set your device up in this way, go watch Introduction to VoiceOver. It's in there. The ones that we care about: VoiceOver recognition, text recognition on, the rest of them off. All of those ones that detect the content of images and some of those things which are convenient for users, right? If a developer forgets to describe a picture of a pet getting fed by a loving family, at least the description is going to say a dog with food and family, right? Like those things that describe them are pretty good, but they don't do good at capturing the intent. The native mobile applications start to feel less inviting than they would be when you hear dog, food, and family over we care about the health of your family and your pets, right? That's a much friendlier phrase. We want to know that those things are missing, not ignore the fact that they're missing. So for text recognition, we want all of them off, except for the text recognition. We will accept text recognition when OCR sees text in an image and reads it out. That's an image of text, and that is perfect. Verbosity, punctuation group, all. We want to hear all of the punctuation, and this is going to be really, really important. This is these two are honestly the most important of those configurations. This idea of text recognition being on and the rest off. The rest off is the important part there. With this punctuation group all thing, and we'll see how we use that when we get here. But we want to hear commas. We want to hear the different beats, and it's going to be annoying. I'm sorry, but we have to. Speak hints on or off. The hints that don't include critical information in a hint. Make sure that they're reasonable. This is like in WCAG parlance, this is like accessibility hints are a AAA requirement. We care about them. We should test for them, turn it on. But at the same time, let's focus on some other more important information. Table headers, row and column headers on, obviously. Navigation style, flat. If you like the group thing, that's cool. If you want to test for it specifically to test for whether that VoiceOver navigation mode works well or not, just acknowledge that that is what you're doing. You're testing that for VoiceOver users. What we are talking about today is testing for everyone else, and flat is beneficial in this case. Finally, navigate images. Always, we don't want images without a content or without an accessibility label to sneak, and we want to navigate them and know that the accessibility label is empty. This is all about manipulating the announcements to give us as much information about the application as we can from the point of view of the accessibility API. And that is what we are going to do now that we have this configuration set up. Picking an application is a little tricky for me. I'm doing this out in the public, and I don't like picking on people. I never want anyone to feel attacked when I'm demonstrating assistive technologies. But one of the reality is if we want to make things more accessible, we have to talk about things that aren't. However, we have to learn about how to point out and talk about objectively incorrect things, and real examples are the only effective way to do so. I will keep my criticisms objective or point out when they are not. I will do my best when I'm talking about these things to stick within objective and subjective, and the assumption is if I'm not telling you that it's subjective, it is, and I hope I don't forget. But I am one of those accessibility experts that likes to keep and give as much flexibility to the designer, as much leeway to the engineer as I can. So when I'm telling you something is wrong, I'm coming from that place of wanting to give everyone as much benefit of the doubt as possible. I will keep my criticisms objective, I promise. That being said, we're talking about platform APIs. So we're talking about picking an application. If I want to be critical, why not start with the platform? I feel like the platform is a fair place to expect to learn about platform APIs. Let's go. All right, so let's do navigating to the Wi-Fi screen. I like this one. Everyone needs Wi-Fi, especially accessibility testers. When I do accessibility testing, the first thing I do when I get my phone is remove all of the security things, unless a client really wants me to leave it there, so that I can just open it up and maybe a quick PIN code or something. But really, like, minimal security. Don't ask for my account. Stop asking me all these questions. Get me on Wi-Fi. Right? Fair process. I literally can't do all that other stuff because I have my phone set up already. So this is the earliest point in the process that I can pull you back into, because the rest of that stuff is already done and you can't undo it, right? So Wi-Fi, great place to start as early as I can get. Let's poke around and see how these configurations, these VoiceOver configurations that we set up, help us test for users who aren't VoiceOver users. Then we'll take a hard nosedive down into a few examples. So I am going to do a really quick demo and live, and I'll read it out to you. Let me exit out of this application. Where'd my QuickTime screen go? Oops, it's over here. So yeah, I'm going to do a quick demo of how these are working and what we're looking for, and then I'm going to dive into a few examples. All right, so I never remember how to get past the VoiceOver shade screen with VoiceOver on, because I'm not a VoiceOver user, I'm a VoiceOver tester. All right, so here we go. So like I said, VoiceOver is already configured for me. We're skipping that, but let's just poke around a little bit, right? All right, so I see I'm on the settings page, settings, heading. I am going to act as VoiceOver just for a little while, and then I'll talk a little bit about what we heard, and then we'll dive in, right? All right, so here is how this VoiceOver configuration works. Settings, heading, search field, double tap to edit, period. Double tap to edit, period. Yay, double tap to edit, period. That period was punctuation mark. Dictate button, double hyphen tap. Sorry, I'm struggling keeping up with it. It wasn't important in this case. Let's skip down to something that's meaningful. All right, so here we go. Review Apple ID phone number, one update available button. This is cool. So we have a review Apple ID phone number. This little one here is red and separate from the label. It's obviously a value of some kind. We have a little affordance here for button, right? So this is a really beautifully marked up thing. We didn't have any erroneous punctuation announced. That's good. So review Apple ID phone number, comma, these little commas here. So if you're following along on my shade, I'll explain these commas now. So these commas, when you notice when, let's find some punctuation real quick. Look, we hyphen find comma Frodo, and then there's an actual comma there, right? We're expanding the punctuation sometimes and not the other times. When you see this comma here, or when you hear a pause instead of the announcement of comma, when you see this, what's happening is the commas that exist within developer supplied strings are being expanded to the word comma. And the commas that exist that are coming from the operating system in terms of separations of pieces of information, like accessibility label and accessibility value, come through as pauses or actual commas in the speech overlay, right? So you will hear the words with commas and periods and the expansion of those spoken evenly, and then you'll hear the pauses between the values, right? So what we have is string information, just words with punctuation, and we have pauses coming from the operating system. Super important concept, right? So that is the nuts and bolts of what this configuration is doing for us, is by providing that punctuation expansion. We know when pauses are coming from the operating system instead of from that punctuation, because that's how punctuation is for. That's why Apple is so proud of their text to speech engine. It does things with punctuation. That's awesome, but that damages our ability to analyze applications for especially when we're talking about for other people. Let's go ahead and dive into some examples coming from these screens that we were just looking at on the Wi-Fi screen. All right, so we don't need our movie recording anymore. All right, so let me get back to my presentation, because I really want to keep the rest of this in the presentation. If I just ramble on about this, it'll be I'll be all over the place, because they're super complex topics. All right, so let me get myself out of the way here. I actually have to shrink myself a little bit, but that's okay. Content is more important here. All right, so let's look at a good thing that Apple did when we are talking about, I stopped and talked about this button here, right? A good example of API usage, a button with a label and a value, right? We have, this is a button, I'm calling it a button because of this little thing here. To me, that's not just a list view cell. This is a full-fledged button. We have a value here of 1. This is separate from the label and is clearly meant to be separate and clearly can change. Review Apple ID phone number. So we have a label, review Apple ID phone number, we have a value of 1, and we have a trade-off button. This is what this control is. I feel like that's pretty straightforward. As a VoiceOver user, I have the label. Let's do the announcement, and then we'll dissect it, right? So here's the announcement. Review Apple ID phone number, comma, not expanded, but the comma. Review Apple ID phone number, comma, 1 update available, comma, button. If I were pausing, review Apple ID phone number, 1 update available, button. Pauses, right? So as a VoiceOver user, I can tell from this that my label, value, and trait are separated the way that they're supposed to be. We have those commas there, and they're not expanded into words. Label, review Apple ID phone number, value 1 update available. Awesome, although we added a little information there, didn't we? This is actually more accessible to VoiceOver users than it is to me, at least the first time. I knew that that was an update because I've seen that pattern before, and so I get used to it. And maybe I'm getting into design. This is about tech. 1 update available is an awesome value. It's perfect. It gives the number of value, and it explains it a little bit. Great. Just 1 would have been acceptable as well. Trait button from this from this over here. Again, there's the proper separator there. We have a comma, a pause that would have happened in this announcement. Perfect. As a voice control user, one of the things that we're talking about is how these things impact other users. So let's see what a voice control user would say. Label, review Apple ID phone number. Here we go. See this VoiceOver, or this voice control. As a voice control user, I see these gray boxes over things I can interact with, and then I can say things like tap review Apple ID phone number, right? So here we know that the label is correct. This also reinforces the fact that our interpretation of this VoiceOver announcement is accurate. We see a label. The unfortunate thing about voice control is we don't really learn anything about traits or values here. The rest of the things that voice control cares about are hidden under private APIs, even ignoring the accessibility trait of button, unfortunately. So this is great. We have seen that the VoiceOver announcement is a perfect reflection of our expected results. Good. They added a little bit of information. Cool. And our voice control check of the label value separation worked out. Awesome. Good job, Apple. This is beautiful. An example of bad API usage. 2 cells down on the Wi-Fi list, we see a very similar control. We have a button with a label and a value. There's an image here that we don't care about because it's presentational. This is universally the Wi-Fi image, and we have Wi-Fi here. So that works. Label, Wi-Fi, value, Frodo, trait, button. We have this Wi-Fi label here. We have Frodo over here next to this caret affordance. This caret affordance is the thing that is making this a button, in my opinion. And we have Frodo, which is the Wi-Fi network that I am connected to at home because I'm a nerd. Frodo is clearly a value. Frodo can change. Frodo can be different. If I went to connect to a different Wi-Fi network, Frodo would change. And in fact, my Wi-Fi can change on its own, and I would want to know if that was happening, right? This is certainly a value. As a VoiceOver user, Y-fee, Frodo. And those are all words. None of those are showing up as those little pauses, right? And to be fair, I forgot to add the word comma button, and the trait information is being shared properly. So the actual announcement from VoiceOver pausing in an exaggerated way for the button announcement so that you can hear the separation between the two would be Y-fee, Frodo, button. Right? The comma here is, again, an operating system pause not supplied by the developer. This is one of the things that helps sighted VoiceOver testers use test with VoiceOver. This speech shade is really, really valuable because you can see the word hyphen and the word comma spelled out, and the comma between Frodo and button. And you don't have to listen for those subtle pauses. It's spelled out on the screen for you. You see hyphen expanded, you see comma not expanded. So the label here is Wi-Fi, comma Frodo, right? We have baked the name Wi-Fi and the value Frodo together into the accessibility label. How do we know that? The words hyphen, the word comma in this case is the one that we're focusing on. The word comma between Wi-Fi and Frodo should be a pause. There should be an operating system pause there, not the word comma, right? There should be a separation of label and value, and we can see that there is not because we can see that the word comma is spread out. And I'm using the word see in the broadest sense, not vision, but we can acknowledge that the word comma is spelled out and therefore that this is inappropriate. The value here is empty, with that evidenced by the fact that there is no pause for the value to then pause for the button. The trait is button. As a voice control user, here's the weird part. This is I don't like this. This makes me feel icky. And I'll tell you why this makes me feel icky. As a voice control user, my label is correct. Label Wi-Fi, right? They do just display the name part. On the next screen, you will see when voice control shows an accessibility label, it would show the whole thing. And if the accessibility label here were Wi-Fi, comma Frodo, I'm gonna stop announcing that hyphen. It's actually confusing. Wi-Fi, comma Frodo. Um, um, it's not, it's just Wi-Fi. The labels are different. And what I think, and this is where we get into the little bit of the speculative nature of things. So I'm gonna be a little easy on happy, but what I believe is that we are detecting VoiceOver, and when VoiceOver is active, we are appending things to an accessibility label that don't belong there. And that as a voice control user, this is correct and behaving the way that we're supposed to, and that we just ignoring the existence of value. Value is empty when VoiceOver expand, when voice control don't expand. This is the reason that accessibility value exists, and we know it because we did it correct 2 cells ago. This is very confusing and mildly concerning. All right, another example of bad API usage. Here, if we go to the next screen where we can select our Wi-Fi, we have our Frodo Wi-Fi shown as selected, right? We can pick another one. I am on Frodo, so that value, that accessibility value, followed me over here. Good. This is a great example, basically, of an accessible implementation of iOS radio buttons, and I love the design. I'm being critical of Apple here a little bit because that's the nature of what I'm doing, but honestly, this is pretty solid. The foundational problem here is the misunderstanding of some important APIs, and we'll get to that problem. Here's another example of bad usage. So what we have here is a selected list view cell with the name of Frodo. And we have some imagery over here that is showing that my network is secure and that it has strong signal. 3 bars, very, very typical Wi-Fi icon showing strong signal. And then there's a little information button. And originally, I translated this as a view with some incorrect, that's just doing a lot. I thought this was making it a button, but actually this is a more info icon. And I didn't even know that until I opened VoiceOver and analyzed this. I realized, oh, that's not an affordance for the list view cell. That's actually a separate control. I'm assuming an iOS user would probably know about that pattern, but it confused me for a second. But that is in fact a more info icon. I don't even remember what you were getting more info about, probably network statistics or something like that. All right, so we have a selected list view cell, Frodo, and some simple statistics about my network. The label in this case is Frodo. The value, I would say something along the lines of secure, strong signal. Notice that there is a me placed comma there. Cool. Trait, button, and selected list view cell. And I made this one big and bold. The reason I made selected list view cell big and bold is that's not part of the public accessibility API. It's something that gets passed. And I don't actually know how it gets passed to the thing, but I do know that it doesn't treat it like an accessibility value. Therefore, I gave it a special place. Actions, more info. So let's look at our view of this as a VoiceOver user. This would be the announcement. Again, I'm going to do the dramatic pauses and read out the commas. Read out the commas that exist from the developers, right? All right, so here it is. Selected. Frodo, comma, secure network, comma, signal strength 3 of 3 bars. Button. Actions available. There was your announcement, right? And here's some of the concerning things, right? This Frodo, comma, secure network, comma, signal strength 3 of 3 bars. I like the individual pieces of information that they have there. In my value, I said secure and strong signal, secure network, comma, signal strength 3 of 3 bars. They were a little more specific. To me, I like my more user-friendly interpretation. To me, weak, medium, and strong signal here would be fine. But they went and they said 3 of 3 bars. Cool, good job. But the concern here is these readouts of the comma. These things should be separated. We should have Frodo pause, secure network, comma, signal, strong signal, right? The readout comma should come not between Frodo and the value. This is bad. This is not semantic proper use of these accessibility APIs, right? So here we can tell that the label is wrong. It is Frodo, comma, secure network, comma, strength 3 of 3 bars, dot, dot, dot. The value is empty. That is wrong in this case. We got the traits right. This selected list view cell. Notice that this selected list view cell thing, I called it a trait because we have this selected pause at the beginning of this. This is healthy, good, all done correctly. Same thing with the button. There are actual drawn commas between the button and the actions available and the end of the value accessibility label in this case. And the end of the all good, and we have the actions, and they did call it the more info action. Cool. As a voice control user, remember my concern from the other slide about this separation of how we have Wi-Fi, comma, Frodo, and then we just have Wi-Fi. Here's why that's concerning. Here, the labels are the same. See this gray bar above voice control says Frodo secure network signal strength 3 of 3. It ignores the commas. Voice control, it's stripping off the commas, but the words are identical, right? Frodo secure comma network signal strength 3 of whatever, right? Voice control is doing something different with the commas that exist within the engineer supplied string content, but the words are the same. If the separation existed in the way it did in the other application, we would be expecting just to see the word Frodo here, despite these obvious voiceover flaws. And in this case, it's wrong in both areas, right? So we have 3 different implementations for what are almost identical controls, and I didn't even get 2 screens into my setting up my device process, ignoring, like I said, whatever happened before I got to the Wi-Fi point, because this is the first thing that I can go back to. Not impressive. This is rough. An important theme. Each of these is to some degree accessible. I'm being critical here because I'm talking about a part of accessibility that I'm passionate about, which is utilizing APIs correctly so that it leads to accessibility for all. Each of these is to some degree accessible. And in fact, as a VoiceOver user, you're probably sitting there wondering, oh, well, I did that, but it wasn't that hard, because if I close my eyes, I could too. It's the inconsistency that concerns me, particularly when that inconsistency is identifiable back to just a completely arbitrary use of those APIs. Each of these is to some degree accessible. Much of the distinction between them is opinion. I am very comfortable with my incorrect markings being on the objective side of this discussion, and I'm trying to avoid opinions. Since I do not know which of these is correct, which of these Apple would prefer, it is best for me to pick the one I know to be the overall best for all users, including considerations for privacy. There is a collective ignorance in the iOS ecosystem as it relates to how accessibility APIs impact users. And this is one of the reasons why, when an accessibility engineer comes to an application engineer and tries to start this conversation, an application engineer can find some control implemented the way that they think is correct. That is wrong. Accessibility engineers in the iOS ecosystem are often left to just do their best because the private nature of the ecosystem makes it impossible to do otherwise. Consistency and guidance is a fair expectation in an ecosystem that prides itself on simplicity. VoiceOver and iOS is iOS because of the simplicity and consistency of its design. Their accessibility APIs are reasonably well documented. There's just a failure to use and understand what they can do in a consistent manner. The need for Mobcag, I don't remember what I keep changing it. I think this is right. Clear guidance. I'm being critical of Apple. Apple's APIs aren't poorly documented. They are a leader in this, actually. Their accessibility APIs are really well documented. However, they do not empathize with the realities of the ecosystem. There's a lot of great documentation attached to the accessibility APIs themselves. And if you stick to a relatively strict interpretation of that documentation, it is correct. However, you can't expect accessibility API documentation alone to lead to the understanding required to utilize those APIs to develop for people. Empathy for people with disabilities is an uncommon trait among engineers, and that is okay. I've trained a lot of engineers in accessibility, and I'm sure some of them haven't opened a screen reader since we were talking, and I still think they're awesome, right? We can't all understand all aspects of a complex ecosystem that, by the way, we're expected to embrace changes in every 6 to 12 months. It's nuts. It's an impossible amount of information to have, and certainly an impossible amount of information to keep updated on. The people who really understand what is required need to be equipped with the tools to teach the engineers how to look. Let accessibility engineers into the ecosystem enough to learn about your APIs so we can help application engineers know what the right thing to do is. When we have such inconsistent examples, not only is it hard to infer what is correct, your documentation or the way that you use them, how are we supposed to know? It's impossible. Apple. Teach accessibility engineers how to communicate about the intricacies of your APIs with application engineers so they can learn about people through them and in turn become better engineers themselves. I have experience connecting these people, and when they respect each other's roles in the ecosystem, stunning progress is made very quickly. I have been into organizations that are coming up into the middle of a dumpster fire level of accessibility issues. And I spend a couple weeks with them and I teach them how to talk to each other. And that's it. It's so simple. All they need is guidance. Mobile platform accessibility guidelines. Clear guidance. As an application engineer, I should not be expected to understand people with disabilities I cannot comprehend in order to feel like I have been successful developing a quality application. An accessibility engineer who understands how people interact with assistive technologies on your platform at a technical level, I should not have to have a master's in API design to do my job effectively. An application engineer should be able to effectively leverage an accessibility engineer's understanding of people. An accessibility engineer should feel guided in mastering the art of improving people's lives through technology, especially their own. Mobile platform accessibility guidelines, a right to privacy. Application engineers should not be able to, through the use of accessibility APIs, detect a person's assistive technology. The expectation of privacy in matters of disability, even from the well-intentioned, is self-evident. And frankly, I'm not going to talk deeply to defend this one. I mostly glossed over it. It could potentially be something we don't understand. Let's give Apple the benefit of the doubt while calling on them to remove such techniques. That is it. That's all I have for you today. Join me on Slack mobily. I've set up a Slack channel. It's something that I wanted to do for a while. I want to talk to you all. I want to work together to stay up to date. It's really, really hard. Let's go. Talk about native mobile accessibility. Was I too rough on Apple? I didn't intend to be, just critical. When you're looking at the overall look and feel and accessibility of their ecosystem, it's awesome. I am a stickler for things that aren't just accessible to one technology. I like to test for and make sure that those APIs are used correctly so that I know that all of those assistive technologies that I can't test for, or that I can't comprehend the use of, still work. I'm an accessibility engineer. What kind of guidance would you need to be successful building more accessible iOS content? And finally, it takes a village, a consistent one that changes a lot. We need to be ready to adapt to these changes. And I love Apple, and I love the things that they do for accessibility. And maybe it's just keeping in touch and keeping consistent about these things is just something that a singular entity can't do. Apple needs our help, right? A lot of the people that I was being critical of when I was doing that are not the people that need to hear the message, right? The developer that built the settings application is just another developer of iOS applications in an ecosystem that is confusing because of a very specific subset of problems relating to just the lack of clarity about what the accessibility APIs do. And the problem is that they're approaching it from two just completely opposite ends of the spectrum. That's why it takes a village. We need to work together to help Apple understand this problem more deeply and to communicate so that maybe we can come to our own agreements about how those things should be developed and what makes sense. And maybe the people that do will be glaring examples of how accessible a consistently built native mobile application can be. Contact me, join the Slack channel, Mobily. I will link it in the description. Social networking, Slack, Mobily, ChrisCM 2006. ChrisCM 2006 pretty much everywhere. This was a long video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you got some useful information out of it.